A leader is a leader because he is a servant. This leader is someone who inspires his followers, her followers.
Through our series of Tutu Talks, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation hopes to reframe unresolved issues within civil society and uncover what moral and ethical leadership entails.
Nothing has ever come about in the absence of a confrontational conversation. As a conversation strategist, I'm in the business of confrontational conversations. I moderate global conversations that are designed to have consequential outcomes. And by this I mean they influence policy, they influence strategy, and at the best of times, they influence beliefs and behavior. And when designed properly, confrontational conversations help us to confront practices and systems that must be changed. And they come about when no further accommodation of what has been can be tolerated. And maybe it's because of this intolerance that confrontational conversations create the space for new identities, for new ways of being, and even new ways of connecting to emerge. In these conversations, something often has to yield. Sometimes something needs to break. Sometimes something needs to make way for change. And I have drawn and I continue to draw inspiration and guidance from the teachings of the Archbishop. And I carry them as tools of my trade as I moderate confrontational conversations. I often go back to the incident in 1980 when the Archbishop led a delegation of church leaders in a confrontational conversation with Prime Minister P.W. Botha. Many have this on record as a meeting without visible impact and without visible outcome. And I couldn't disagree more. I've learned that confrontation is not the same as violence, nor does it bear its fruit in that exact moment. And in the absence of this delegation's confrontational conversation with the Prime Minister, the provocation for change might not have been seeded. And so today I take this and I use this learning to seed provocation in my own way, to use new questions as weapons that force us to reframe the understanding of issues. And I walk away knowing that the seed has been planted and the fruit of this confrontational conversation will be born in time. I have also learned through the study of the Archbishop's life that conversations can be, and in fact, I think they must be instruments of justice. For me to be able to use conversations in this way as tools of justice, I must first find the courage to lean into the conversations that are most inconvenient and most difficult. And whether it was speaking up for gay rights or highlighting the similarities between apartheid and the treatment of Palestinians in the Israeli-Palestinian war, or even calling out corruption in the very liberation movement that delivered democracy and freedom in South Africa, the Archbishop has been consistently courageous. And I learned from this. I take this with me as I step into inconvenience, as I step into difficulty. And I remind myself that I have the most important tool in my hand. I have the conversation. I also practice the art of holding space. I know that my voice is not the most important voice. In fact, it should be the least heard. And this learning and this practice comes from observing that when we are in service of the conversation, we're able to expand the conversational space, even whilst confrontation writhes in its belly. You'll remember that when Chris Hani was murdered, South Africa teetered at the edge of the cliff of civil war. And it was the Arch's ability to hold the space, to expand the space, that brought the nation back from that edge and onto a reconciliatory path. His service to the conversation as he chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission remains even today global best practice that I too bring into the practice of my work. And funnily enough, I've not sought out the work of confrontational conversations like one would seek out a career path or a profession. I was born in the midst of a confrontational conversation. My life experiences have been a series of confrontational conversations, including those that I was not even fully aware that I was having, and those that were had by others on my behalf. And with time, I've learned that the sum of all of my experiences has actually really been the training and the preparation that I needed to be able to do the work of confrontational conversations today. I was born in 1984 into the clutches of a confrontational conversation. For those of you who remember, the mid-80s, the province of Natal, what we now call KwaZulu-Natal, was engulfed in violent conflict as the African National Congress and the Inkatha Freedom Party, and of course the United Democratic Front, fought for power, and they were fighting for control of this very homeland. And for me, one of my earliest childhood memories is of fleeing our home that had been torched, feeling the heat of the flames on my back as I clung onto my father and we fled in pursuit of safety. My parents would later fill in the gaps of these early memories, telling me a story of a young family fleeing into the forest lands in the province. My father would tell me how he and my mother tried to live with me in the forest, sleeping in our white Passat, for those of you who remember this VW model, and cooking from the primer stove wedged between the front and the back doors. An untenable situation where something had to give, and something did give. And I landed in a home within the safety of the Anderson family, who were at the time defying the state by illegally taking on black children whose parents were on the run under the pretense of being a preschool for workers in the area. I would learn that in later years that because of my skin tone, which was light enough for me to pass as colored, I was passed off as one of the Andersons' own children. And to complete this identity, I was given the name Bridget Anderson. Something had to give for something new to emerge. The Andersons would raise me as their own until our national confrontational conversation, a conversation that demanded a new system of government and governance. In 1990, I was reunited with my parents. I would keep the name Bridget as per the archaic laws of our time, but I would now be able to take on our family surname, Mbandra. And I became Bridget Mbandra. And as I entered the primary school system, this was the name I'd learned to respond to and to answer to. As a child, this duality of being called both Bridget Mbandra at school and Nozipho Mbandra at home would leave me at times confused, but oscillating between these two identities. My family often still teases me even today that I have moments of sounding more like Bridget than I do Nozipho. The confrontational conversation that my parents had to have in pursuit of their freedom has been undoubtedly the gift of fluidity in my identity that I had to learn to perfect as a child, but today is a tool that I use in my work. Fast forward to 1994, where I would have to confront the impact of freedom as a 10-year-old child. I had by then transitioned into a school that had previously been reserved for white children only. I'd learned to speak English with a new tonality. I had to learn how to connect and to behave differently. I had to learn how to see the world differently. And all of these things as I sought out friendship and belonging. And this childhood experience is a gift that I tap into every single day in my space. To hold conversational space and to expand that space, I have to allow myself to go into a deep, deep posture of empathy where multiple worldviews, multiple beliefs, multiple experiences can all coexist. And that allows us to find each other in the midst of a confrontational conversation. With teenage maturity, I would go on to secondary schooling, where I would become so much more aware of my difference. I'd become so much more aware of my lack and my poverty. And being amongst relatively more privileged learners, I was forced to adopt a mindset of multiplicity. And what I mean by this is that I needed to both understand my own lack and my own poverty and that of my parents and my family, but I needed to do that without letting go of the opportunities that open up when we approach the world with a mindset of abundance. And today, thought leaders like Jim Collins would call this the genius of the both and. And I see it as one of my childhood gifts that has been and has become an indispensable tool in my work today. And if we just think about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission again, it lived up to and surpassed the genius of the both and. It created space for pain, for anger, for repent, for denial, and forgiveness in one room. In my early professional years, I would discover that the most powerful tool of justice was already within me. It was there in my words and my ability to use my words to confront injustice and call out for change. And perhaps it is true that we learn to be courageous through small acts of courage every single day, without being always conscious of this muscle that I was building through my childhood into adulthood. I think I made my fair share of courageous decisions and professional decisions, including leaving full-time employment to pursue a career that didn't exist. Find me a conversation strategist before me and I'll pay you. Reflecting on my journey, I know that courage is contagious. I know that the courage that the Arch has shown throughout his life has been a seed of courage in my life. And because of that, I will continue to moderate confrontational conversations that allow us to take on practices and systems that can no longer be tolerated. And I will continue to have faith that the fruits of my work will create space for new identities, for new ways of being, and even new ways of connecting to emerge.